Is there a world where we get back to the newsstand where comics are available there and like they were back in the 80s and parts of the 90s? Sadly, probably not, but maybe not for the reasons you think. Hey there, this is Perch. I've been thinking about the newsstand, and a lot of people talk about we need to bring the newsstand back, and we need to kind of recover this lost part of comics. And comics were a lot healthier during the days of the newsstand, and it'd be good if we could return to that. And as we've talked about in videos in the past, and it feels like not everyone always absorbs this subject, but comics weren't necessarily that much healthier in the past. There were aspects of the business that was healthier. For example, the distribution, just having more visibility on comics and raising that awareness, I think has led to the boom we've seen today, particularly outside of comics with the media. A lot of the people making these movies and pushing these movies and seeing them are people who grew up in the 80s with the newsstand. That was they were the driving force. Not what I'm saying here is not the 20. Obviously, the people who are 20-year-old were not alive in the 80s. I'm saying the people who pushed to make the movies and get this thing going grew up with a newsstand. Those people are in their 40s and 50s. Anyway, just for reference, because there'll be somebody who'll be like, well, actually, the people who are buying the in-game tickets were an average age of 24, and that is clearly wrong using your math. Like, all right, buddy. Anyway, that voice is annoying. Um, the interesting thing about the newsstand is, like I said, it wasn't necessarily as healthy as people make it out to be. People will say, "Hey, we need to go back to the newsstand. The newsstand was perfect in every way." No, a lot of stuff got pulped on the newsstand. There was a lot of waste. There was a lot of comics that went nowhere, but there were aspects of it that were positive. That's why it's a complicated. It's not an apples to apples conversation. But the challenge is the newsstand isn't the newsstand anymore. I mean, it's not like the aspect of going to the grocery store and sitting on the dirty floor reading comics on the newsstand while your mom did the shopping is that doesn't that doesn't really happen anymore. For a lot of reasons, kids aren't just left to their own devices to go wander around in the grocery store as much as they used to be. And there's not the gas station where you would go in and see comics. There's not the local convenience store is not the same. I mean, these things don't really exist like they used to. So even if comics could return there, we're talking about them returning to places like, so maybe Whole Foods. Do you think Whole Foods is going to have a comic section next to the magazines? I mean, yes, there's Safeways and there's Albertsons and there's a Piggly Wiggly and there's Publix and those places, but it's hard to imagine that the newsstand is really going to be a big factor anymore because those places aren't around. And so you can't just go back to that unless you're talking about the entire world going back. And in some cases that would be delightful. Don't get me wrong, but it's not possible. So where would comics go? When we're talking about the newsstand, the new newsstand is kind of Starbucks or places where you've got some conglomeration of kids. I mean, you're talking about putting comics maybe in GameStop or in it's a tougher place to figure out where they go. So it's not like we can just kind of turn the corner and return to that. Now it doesn't mean it doesn't mean we can't solve distribution and visibility. We do need to solve those things, and there are solutions to those. It's just the challenge and why I object sometimes, and I have when Richard Meyer with his I don't know his channel that I can never remember the name of now. The diversity in comics guy who's something else now. He'll do we have to go back. We have to go back. The problem is, but to where? We have to. The entire world has to go back again. I'm all for it. I hate the current political zoo. Life's a lot more complicated, man. If I could turn the clock and go back to me as a teenager, that would rock. I'm all down for that. Get rid of this old age problem. Shit. I'm sorry. But it's you can't just turn the entire clock back. So if we're just turning back comics, we can't go back. We have to go forward, and the go forward is it's where we find places for comics to go to increase visibility. Now, great and nice, and I've talked about digital. I've talked about sharing things on social media. I've talked about all those things before, and that's all new, great. But there does have to be some place where people are going that comics can be. And the malls are dying. The Barnes and Nobles. I'm amazed every year that still exists. There aren't really bookstores in the mall anymore. You can put stuff in Hudson Books in the airport and catch those jet setting kids that are wandering around, I suppose. But you need to find some place where kids are, and the most viable place right now is probably what Scholastic does in the schools. And it's one of the reasons why Scholastic as a program and why there is some attention on it, why I think Marvel and DC and some of these are not dummies for focusing on Scholastic. That is a place where kids are getting visibility to comics. So it makes sense that they're going to go there. The problem is they're not running any kind of coherent strategy there. So you're getting people like Rainbow Rowell and her other work, or Raina Telgemeier or Dav Pilkey. They're cleaning house because they're approaching that market correctly. They're approaching that market like a market. They're not messing around by trying to kind of shoehorn in comics that have been written for the newsstand by people who weren't even alive when there was. Sorry, I got my tongue tied. This is where going back and editing would be a good thing. Sorry. The strategy that Marvel and DC often use for Scholastic is by taking comics that are written for the direct market. That was my mistake. And they're written and edited and in many cases curated by people who were not alive when there was a newsstand. So the idea of reaching kids in that way is gone. They're reaching people who are in their 20s who are used to going to a comic shop. They're focusing on that market. I mean, if you're in Portland, go to a Portland comic shop, look around, see the environment, see the people shopping there. A lot of the writers of comics, that's the only exposure to comics they have. Not just today, maybe their entire life. So asking them to kind of reignite what the newsstand should be, they have no context for it. And things like Scholastic or these other efforts, it's completely outside of their wheelhouse. So that's one of the challenges why things haven't landed and why they're not succeeding. But I'd love for these things to come back. How? You've got to find a place where you can go where people will read and see comics. And I'm not gonna, make no mistake about it. If we can get comics in the grocery store, great. But there are very few magazines in the grocery store, and they are tucked away in a weird aisle with like baby food and greeting cards. Like that's no man's land. You can put them in, your Walmart. Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of that now. Target. Yeah, again, there's some magazines there. It's just we have to open the door and figure out where stuff goes, and people are trying. And I think that's why the efforts of Scholastic, the Walmart giants, that kind of stuff. These are people trying to find their way into a market. It's not straightforward. Anyway, what do you think? Can you bring it back? Do you have the money idea? If you do, you're going to be rich. It can be done, but we got to figure it out how. Leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. Maybe you have that great idea. Would love to hear it. A lot of people would. Follow me, subscribe, like, all those kinds of things. I'm on Twitter at Comic Perch. Thanks for listening.